What if I told you that the ultimate biological hack for, nervous system regulation wasn't actually discovered in some high-tech modern laboratory,
Right.
but it was actually written down as this poetic observation thousands of years ago?
Yeah, it's wild.
It is wild. So today we are taking a deep dive into a really specific set of sources that you sent us. We're looking at a daily reflection and commentary on the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, it's chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, and this is dated August 20, 2026.
Yeah.
And the mission for this deep dive, especially for you, the learner who brought this to our attention, is to bridge what seems, at least on the surface, like an impossible gap.
Oh, completely. It sounds like two different worlds.
Exactly. I mean, we are going to connect this ancient spiritual philosophy with the really hard mechanistic realities of things like, environmental psychology, cellular biology, and cognitive science.
And I think it's important to set the tone here right from the start, because the overarching goal here isn't to just translate some Sanskrit and offer a dry history lesson.
Right. Please no.
Yeah, nobody wants that. The texts you've provided actually decode these ancient verses into a highly practical framework.
Okay.
Like, we are looking at how a text written millennia ago effectively maps out concepts like biophilia or, thermodynamic energy and even the genetic code.
Which is crazy.
It is. Way before anyone in a lab coat ever coined those terms. It provides this incredible lens for understanding our fundamental connection to the physical and intellectual world right now, today.
Okay, well, let's unpack this right from the physical reality because, the commentary on verse 9 starts in the dirt, literally.
Literally in the dirt, yeah.
So the line translates as, the pure, sweet fragrance of the earth, identifying the divine directly with this scent.
Yeah.
And it's pointing to petrichor, right? That incredible, really distinct smell of rain hitting dry earth.
Yes. And when we look at the environmental psychology and the evolutionary biology embedded in your sources, petrichor is just fascinating.
I love that smell so much.
Everyone does. And there's a reason for it. It's actually driven by this chemical called geosmin.
Geosmin. Okay.
Yeah, which is produced by a very specific type of soil bacteria called Streptomyces.
Oh, wow. So it's bacteria.
Exactly. So when the earth dries out, right, these bacteria, they produce spores to survive. And when rain finally hits the soil, the physical force of the raindrops actually aerosolizes those spores.
Okay, so it kicks them up into the air.
Right, releasing that geosmin into the air. But what is truly stunning here is human sensitivity to it.
How so?
Well, the human nose can detect geosmin at something like 5 parts per trillion.
Wait, trillion. With a T.
With a T, 5 parts per trillion. To put that in perspective, a shark's ability to smell blood and water, which we always hear about, right?
Right. Like the classic movie trope.
Yeah, that is significantly less sensitive than our ability to smell wet dirt.
That is insane. Which, that begs the question, why? Like, why is our biology so hyper-tuned to this specific soil bacteria?
It all comes down to survival. For our nomadic ancestors, catching the scent of rain miles away, it meant the difference between life and death.
Oh, sure, because it meant water.
Water to drink, obviously, but also it signaled plant growth. It signaled animal migration patterns.
Right, food.
Exactly. Because it was so incredibly crucial, our evolutionary biology wired that scent directly into the deepest parts of our brain.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you inhale petrichor, you aren't just processing like, oh, that's a pleasant smell.
Right, it's not like smelling a candle.
No, not at all. The olfactory bulb has a direct, unmediated line to the amygdala and the hippocampus.
And those are the emotion and memory centers, right?
You got it. It bypasses the thalamus entirely, which is rare for sensory input. So smelling geosmin actively forces the parasympathetic nervous system to engage.
Oh, so it physically calms you down.
Literally. Your heart rate slows, your cortisol levels drop. It's this involuntary biological override.
That is so cool. It's like a prehistoric somatic grounding tool.
Exactly.
So the Gita is essentially identifying that uncorrupted nature isn't just, aesthetically pleasing to look at. It acts as an immediate physical portal to inner calm.
Yeah, thousands of years ago they knew this.
Right. Long before we had biofeedback monitors or stress tests, this text was asserting that if you want to experience the fundamental truth of existence, you don't start by, looking up at the sky.
Right.
You start by smelling the wet dirt. The sacred is the mundane.
The sacred is the wet dirt. I love that. But it's interesting because the verse immediately transitions from that calming, grounding sensory input to something wildly active.
Okay, what's the shift?
So the next phrase in the Sanskrit, Tejas Kasmi Vibhavasau, Translates to, I am the radiant brilliance and heat and fire.
Heat and fire. Okay.
Yeah, and the commentary links this directly to what it calls the dynamic thermal matrix.
The dynamic thermal matrix.
Sounds very sci-fi, right? But it's talking about metabolic energy, the power of mitochondria, and cellular transformation.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if the smell of rain is the cooling mechanism, this radiant heat is the literal engine. Let's look at the mechanics of this because, well, equating the divine with the heat and fire is a massive statement when you view it through modern thermodynamics.
It really is.
Because in our cells, mitochondria act as these microscopic furnaces, right?
Yeah, the powerhouse of the cell.
Right. Everyone remembers that from high school biology. But they take the raw material we consume, like glucose, and through the process of cellular respiration, they strip away electrons, they pump protons across a membrane, and they synthesize ATP.
Which is the energy currency of the body.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating here is the biological reality of that process is essentially a controlled combustion.
Oh, interesting. Controlled combustion.
Yeah. When those phosphate bonds in ATP are broken, like to allow your muscles to move, or even just for your brain to process a thought, heat is released.
Right, which is why we're warm.
This is exactly why a living body is warm. So the text is building this comprehensive picture of reality here. It establishes the grounding sensory input first, right?
The petrichor.
The petrichor. And then it immediately points to the thermodynamic energy that drives the entire system.
Wow.
By identifying the divine with metabolic heat and solar warmth, the commentary is making this radical claim. It removes the divine from the clouds, like you said earlier, and places it squarely in the physics and biology of cellular transformation.
I mean, that naturally leads to a friction point for me, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I want to push back on the next part of verse 9. Because if the heat of the mitochondria is the engine of our biology, right, like the hardware running the system,
Yeah.
the text then introduces the driver of that engine. So the Sanskrit is Jivanam Sarva Bhute, which is the vital life force in all living beings.
Right, the jivanam.
But modern biology has pretty much completely discarded the idea of vitalism, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like this old belief that there is some magical, non-physical substance that makes things alive. Because we know about DNA and proteins and the electron transport chain now.
Yeah, the mechanics.
Right. So how do we reconcile this idea of a vital spark with the hard science we just discussed without just sort of drifting into pseudoscience?
It's a great question. And we do it by looking at it through the lens of complex systems theory and emergence.
Okay, emergence.
Yeah, rather than literal ghost in the machine vitalism, the text isn't arguing for a magic substance hiding out between your cells.
Right. It's not ectoplasm.
Exactly. It is pointing to the animating principle. It's the profound reality that when you organize matter in a highly specific way, an emergent property arises that is entirely greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay, I think I follow.
Think of it like this. You can have all the chemicals required for life sitting in a test tube.
Right.
You've got the carbon, the hydrogen, the ATP, all of it. But it isn't alive. The jivanam is that emergent organizing principle that allows a collection of atoms to actually experience reality, to breathe, to adapt.
Okay, but how does that philosophical distinction actually apply to the learner's everyday life?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, understanding complex systems theory is great for a textbook. But how does acknowledging an emergent, vital spark change, say, a stressful Tuesday morning commute? Or a really frustrating interaction with a coworker?
Ah, I see. Well, it actively rewires your baseline for ecological and social empathy.
Empathy from complex systems?
Yeah, think about it. If you operate from a purely reductionist mechanical worldview, like viewing everything as just isolated atoms bouncing off each other, you treat the world mechanically.
Okay, that makes sense.
You extract from it, you use it, and you discard it. I mean, you don't empathize with your laptop or your toaster, right?
I mean, sometimes I yell at my laptop, but no, I don't empathize with it.
Exactly, because they lack that internal experience.
Right. They don't have a jivanam.
Exactly. They don't have the jivanam. But when you consciously recognize that the exact same organizing principle, that identical emergent life force that is currently animating your own consciousness, is also currently animating the trees you drive past, or the stray dog on the street.
Or that infuriating coworker in the break room.
Yes, even them. When you realize that, your entire operational framework shifts. You stop existing as this isolated observer sitting on the Earth, and you realize you are participating in a shared biological and conscious web.
Oh, wow.
It forces a kind of reverence that a purely mechanical worldview just cannot sustain.
Okay, that interconnected worldview, it requires maintenance, though,
Yeah.
right? Like, the text doesn't just leave us floating in this passive state of empathy,
No, not at all.
because it brings in the concept of tapa, or tapas, which is translated as inner discipline and focused willpower.
Yes, tapas is crucial here.
And historically, in a lot of Western adaptations of Eastern philosophy, tapas gets framed as this sort of extreme asceticism.
Oh, definitely.
You know, the image, the guy sleeping on a bed of nails, starving himself, sort of viewing the physical body as an enemy that has to be punished into submission.
And the contemporary commentary in your sources completely dismantles that historical baggage, which I love.
Me too.
It defines tapas not as self-punishment, but as the friction of constructive discipline.
Constructive friction. You know, the analogy that came to mind reading the sources was striking a match.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because to get a match to ignite, you absolutely require friction. You have to strike it against that rough strip on the box.
Right.
If you just tap it gently, nothing happens. But if you smash it with a hammer out of aggression, you just destroy the match.
Right, you break it.
Yeah. The goal isn't to scratch the match to pieces. The goal is to apply the exact right amount of constructive friction to ignite the chemical head and create light.
That is perfectly said. Tapas is exactly that constructive friction.
Yeah.
And the neuroscience backing up that concept of constructive friction is incredibly robust right now.
Oh, really? In what way?
Well, when we talk about neuroplasticity, which is, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and essentially adapt, we know it requires literal metabolic effort.
Meaning it physically costs energy.
Yes. When you try to break a habit or focus on a difficult task instead of just doom scrolling on your phone.
Right, which we all do.
Right. Or when you choose to breathe through a spike of anger instead of lashing out, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex in your brain is activated.
The anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
Yeah, and you experience a physiological sensation of agitation or friction.
Oh, like that uncomfortable feeling when you really don't want to do something, but you know you should.
Exactly, that discomfort. The older, primitive parts of the brain are actually resisting the energy expenditure required to change.
Wait, so the discomfort isn't the sign that you're doing something wrong. The discomfort is the physical sensation of the papas working.
Yes, it is the biological cost of illumination. Constructive friction generates that metabolic heat, the tejas we discussed earlier.
Right, the heat and the fire.
Yes. It transforms the raw material of your distractions into focused willpower. It's refining the system, not punishing it.
Man, that completely changes how I view, like, struggling to focus on a Friday afternoon.
You're right. It's not a failure. It's just friction.
Yeah. Okay, so if constructive friction generates our inner light and our biology provides the engine, we kind of have to follow the logic outward.
Right. Where are we going?
Well, where does the blueprint for all of this come from? Like, does biology just spontaneously generate its own instructions, or are we tapping into some pre-existing architecture?
Ah, I see.
And this transitions our deep dive directly into verse 10, which shifts the scale entirely. We go from the cellular level straight to the cosmic.
We zoom way out.
Yeah. The Sanskrit here is bija ma sarva bhutana vidipartha sanatanam, which translates to, know me to be the eternal primeval seed of all beings. The Bhuja Sanatanam.
And the commentary is really helpful here. It compares this eternal seed to a genetic code.
Okay.
So it notes that the DNA of a massive, sprawling oak tree is entirely contained within this tiny, seemingly dormant acorn.
Right.
The seed is basically invisible to the naked eye relative to the tree, yet it contains infinite latent potential. But we can actually push this even further into the realm of modern physics, specifically information theory.
Okay, let's go there, but let's avoid the cliche analogies here.
Fair enough.
Because a lot of people compare this to a standard computer zip file. But a zip file implies compression after the fact, right? Like, it requires an external user to click unzip.
What the text seems to be describing is far more foundational than that.
Oh, much more foundational. In quantum mechanics and theoretical physics, there is this concept pioneered by physicists like David Bohm, and it's regarding what he called the implicate order.
The implicate order, what does that mean?
So Bohm argued that the physical reality we see around us, the trees, the planets, our bodies, all of that is the explicate order, the unfolded reality. But beneath that explicate order is the implicate order. It's a deeper hidden framework where everything is essentially enfolded into everything else.
Enfolded, so it's already there.
Exactly. And similarly, the physicist John Wheeler, he coined the phrase "it from bit."
It from bit.
Yeah, suggesting that the universe isn't fundamentally made of matter or energy at its core, but of information.
Wait, so information precedes matter? According to this theory, yes.
Okay, so then the Bhajasanapana, this eternal seed from the Gita, is the ultimate implicate order.
Exactly.
It is the raw, unmanifested information from which all forms, all complex systems, and all biological realities eventually render into existence.
Yeah.
It's the architecture of reality before the house is even built.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
When the Gita speaks of the eternal seed, it is describing a universe that is profoundly intelligent at its base layer.
Wow.
The potential for a human brain, the potential for a star, even the potential for that smell of rain we talked about.
Like a petrichor.
Right. All of that information is folded into the foundational quantum field of reality.
Which, okay, this brings us to the most practical and, frankly, the most ego-bruising part of the deep dive for me.
Ego-bruising? Why?
Well, if we're walking around with this cosmic architecture, right, this foundational universal intelligence underlying our reality, how does that manifest when I'm, say, sitting in a 3 p.m. budget meeting trying to solve a massive logistical nightmare? Because verse 10 brings this vast concept back down into the human skull. It examines the phrase buddhir buddhimattam, which translates to the discerning intellect of the intelligent.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the commentary argues that profound clarity, deep wisdom, and those sudden breakthrough moments of problem solving,
Right.
they are not merely the isolated human ego at work.
And see, reading this gave my sense of self-importance a massive reality check.
I bet.
Because the implication is that when I spend weeks agonizing over a complex problem at work, and suddenly, while I'm just washing the dishes, I have a massive eureka moment.
The aha moment.
Right. The text is suggesting that it isn't actually my individual genius producing that thought.
Yeah, and it feels incredibly counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially in our hyper-individualistic culture.
Oh, absolutely. We obsess over personal credit.
Personal branding, owning your ideas, all of that.
Yes.
But let's look at the mechanism the commentary is actually suggesting. It isn't saying you didn't do the work.
Okay, that's a relief.
Right. The tapas, that neuroplastic friction we talked about, that was absolutely necessary to prepare your... You had to gather the data. You had to formulate the question.
I had to strike the match.
You struck the match. But the actual insight, that flash of profound synthesized clarity, that is universal intelligence operating through your cognitive apparatus.
So it's kind of like cloud computing.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Because for a long time, people use the analogy of a radio antenna, right? That the brain just tunes into a frequency. But cloud computing feels much more accurate to both the neuroscience and the philosophy here.
How so? Walk me through it.
Well, my individual brain is the local hardware. And I have to maintain the hardware. I have to do the tapas to process the local data and write the specific query for whatever problem I have.
Right.
But when the profound answer finally arrives, my local hardware isn't generating it from scratch. It's essentially fetching a data packet from a shared open-source universal API.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. Your local hardware doesn't have the processing power to hold the entire universe.
Obviously not.
But it has the clearance to access the network. So when you achieve a state of high clarity, your individual buddhi, your discerning intellect, is temporarily aligning with the Bhuja Sanatanam, that universal operating system.
No, initially I'll admit that felt really defensive to me.
Like you were losing ownership?
Yeah. Like my intellectual property was being stolen by the universe.
Yeah.
But when you really absorb the cloud computing analogy, it actually relieves this enormous psychological burden.
Oh, totally.
Because it cures intellectual arrogance, first of all. You realize you are just a node on a vast network.
Yeah.
But more importantly, for a lot of people, I think it completely cures imposter syndrome.
Yes, because you cannot be an imposter if the genius was never isolated to your local hardware to begin with.
Exactly.
You aren't faking it. You are successfully participating in it.
That is such a liberating thought.
It really is. And this realization sets the stage for the final crucial piece of the commentary on verse 10, which is tesas vinam, the radiant vitality and courage of the valiant.
So we move from the intellect, which is like downloading the insight, to the action, courage.
Right.
And the text draws a very sharp distinction here between authentic courage and just superficial bravado.
And we see superficial bravado everywhere today.
Oh, constantly.
It is the local hardware trying desperately to convince everyone in the room that it is a supercomputer.
That is exactly what it is.
It's ego-driven, it relies on posturing, on aggressive confidence, and usually just sheer volume. And because it is so isolated, it is incredibly fragile.
Right, because the moment that superficial bravado is actually challenged in any real way, it fractures.
Yeah.
It turns into insecurity or defensiveness or rage.
Exactly. True Tejas, the radiant courage that the Gita is describing here stems from aligning with what philosophers and theologians often call the ground of being.
Meaning, true moral courage isn't an act you put on. It's just a natural byproduct of knowing you are backed by the entire cloud.
Yes.
If you deeply understand that you are animated by the exact same vital emergent spark as everything else, and that your highest intellect is just a vessel for universal wisdom, then the fear of localized failure basically evaporates.
That's beautifully said. True courage, like the ability to maintain grace in the face of profound adversity, or to stand firm against massive injustice without being consumed by hatred.
But
That kind of courage does not come from hyping yourself up in front of a mirror.
no.
It is generated by a deep, unshakable anchoring in this universal framework we've been discussing. You act with radiance because you are no longer defending an isolated, fragile ego.
Yeah.
You are expressing the fundamental reality of the system.
Man. Let's pull all of these threads together, because the journey through these two verses has been incredibly dense.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We started with the mission to bridge this ancient text with modern science,
Okay.
and the overlap is just staggering. We began with somatic grounding, how the scent of petrichor uses our evolutionary biology to physically force the nervous system into a state of calm.
Right.
And then we explored the dynamic thermal matrix, basically mapping the divine to the literal thermodynamic heat produced by our mitochondria.
And from there, we moved into the philosophy of complex systems, identifying the jivanam, the vital spark, not as some supernatural ghost, but as the emergent organizing principle of life that demands profound ecological empathy.
Empathy for the toaster ring.
Exactly. And we examined how tapas, the constructive friction of neuroplasticity, allows us to harness that energy without destroying the match.
Then we scaled way up to the implicate order, the Bhajasanatanam, this foundational information architecture that precedes physical matter.
Right.
And finally, we brought it back down into the human skull, reframing our highest intellect as local hardware, accessing a universal API, which naturally yields that unshakable moral courage of the Teshas.
So the ultimate value of this deep dive for the learner, and really anyone exploring these texts, isn't about memorizing Sanskrit terminology so you can sound well-read at a dinner party.
No.
It's about a fundamental shift in perception. It is the realization that the profound and the universal, they are not hiding on some inaccessible mountaintop somewhere.
Right.
They are woven into the thermodynamic biology of your cells. They structure your moments of intellectual clarity. And they are waiting for you in the simple, earthy smell of rain on the pavement.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as you head into your commute or your next meeting, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to really mull over.
Okay.
If we accept the premise we've unpacked today, that universal intelligence operates through our individual cognitive apparatus to create breakthrough moments, what happens to the clarity of that signal when we consciously stop getting in our own way? If we stop obsessively taking credit for every thought and stop acting like the isolated generator of our own genius, and instead view our minds purely as receivers tuning into a grander frequency, how much clearer and how much louder could that music become? We'll leave you to explore that on your own.